Okay, we have rubbed our project from both sides, massaging it from both sides. You can see it's starting to adhere to the resist and getting a little bit firmer, and as I fold it up, I've drained a little bit of the water off. You can see that it's starting to buckle on there. It's not felt yet, it's very much soft felt. It's kind of puckering up off the resist a little bit, but not completely. It's not time to take it off, but we can roll it now. So for the moment, I'm going to leave the mesh on. I'm going to add a little bit of hot water to heat it up. We're just going to go right kind of down the center. A little bit of soap. And I'm not sure we mentioned in the beginning, but you'll need something to tie it off. And I just keep a bag of old cut up t-shirts on hand for tying up, so they're real easy to get on and off. So let's go ahead and roll up our project and go around your pool noodle or whatever you're using. And you can roll fairly firmly. This is a thin project, so it's not doing a lot of buckling. And then I like to roll on a towel or a sheet. A thin sheet works well. In this case, you could probably use a super long pillowcase. You want it to be firm and not slogging around while you roll it. You don't want it, misforming all the time while you're rolling it. Okay, so this one, our little project, if you saw us do wet felting over resist, we just rocked and rolled in our hand. And here we have our table at the proper height, and we're going to go ahead and roll from fingertips to elbows. And let's do this 50 times, and then we'll do it from the other end 50 times and take it off and check. We'll turn it around and roll from this side. You can see it's starting to buckle on the resist. We're going to go ahead and remove the mesh and roll it 50 times from each direction here, and then look about taking it off. We have just rolled from each end and each side 50 times, so 50 times from each end on both sides. And you can see that it's starting to pucker and hold together. What we'd like to do is take it off the template now and continue felting with it off the template. So we want to do it as it's starting to shrink. Now's a good time to take it off. So we are going to cut it right here in the center, and we can cut into the ends as well. If you decide to cut off the whole end, we cut off just inside so that if you want an option of it still to be a little bit closed at the ends, have a little bit of hug, you can do that. You certainly don't have to. Either end could be the wrist or upper arm area. So just reach under there. This is dead center right there where the fold is. You can tell because the template is buckling there. So we're just going to go ahead and snip a small place and then just find your way to the resist. And we'll clean up that edge after we get it off. So unlike our vessel, we're not so worried about keeping that hole particularly small. We can trim this again after we get it off. It was already buckling under there a little bit. I'll just go ahead and cut it all the way around. So it looks like I didn't cut them even. Who knows where my mind was at that moment. It looked fairly even. So I'll probably, to make them symmetrical, make up the difference a little bit as I cut it. Or else one end shrunk more than the other. It almost seems like it, but this is where we are right now, taking them off the template, and we can finish them up. On closer inspection, I looked and could see that I didn't cut them in half off my template the way it was buckling and had shifted a little bit. So no problem. This is a pretty free-flowing design on both sides. The dark just came down here and here, and then on this side, if I look at it, I can make a slight adjustment and they'll be pretty close to symmetrical. And what I'm going to do is just go ahead and make those cuts now before we full any further. I'm going to trim this one down to about here and then take off a little bit of the bottom. So they'll be the same, and I'll go ahead and trim the bottom off this one as well. I'm going to trim them all the way across. We're going to do a lot more shrinking now, but you can see even at this point kind of how it's fitting. It's big, it's really loose and baggy, and so we're going to do a lot more felting at this point. I'm going to heat up our project and do some more rolling and more massaging. Okay, so we have our gloves cut to the final length they're going to be, and all the rest of the shrinkage is going to happen in the felting and the folding process. Refold them so that what was the edge is now in the middle, and we're just going to work out that little line that's formed. It's not a seam, the edges haven't felted together, but you can see here that the wool's kind of trained itself into that little point. So we're going to start by flattening that out. Go ahead and heat up the project, dip it in your water, and get the entire length of your gloves soapy again. We're going to hand felt by rubbing, and then we're going to focus on the edges and seal those up before we continue felting. Now, most of our shrinkage at this point has happened on the length of the gloves. We've been shrinking the long way, and now we want to also shrink the short way. So we're going to do that here. We're going to both rub the short way, or what would be around the arm, and we're also going to roll the short way so that we start shrinking them in that direction. Okay, so let's focus on our edges a little bit. You can put the wool on either side, just rub them so that we really seal the edges, and spend a few minutes here massaging and rubbing both edges of your gloves to really seal those down, felt them down. Okay, so we're going to roll also from the width now, and we're going to roll them up to shrink them in the width so that they get closer around your arm. And we're going to go ahead and roll 50 times from each direction. And in this case, we can just do little shorter bursts because we're not going such a long distance. So you can just do kind of the rock and roll technique. You don't have to even go the whole length of your arm. We're just going to do little short bursts. Okay, we are making some progress here on our wrist warmers. They're feeling pretty good. We need to continue working them, and we're going to refold them, just always trying to avoid having a crease in them. You'll notice that we frequently just reheat our project and keep it warm. We're going to see how they feel and continue shrinking them both lengthwise and widthwise. So focus on smoothing out that seam and make sure there's no crease happening there, and start to think about where you want the design to fall on your hand. You can see that they're really quite big, but don't worry, we're going to be shrinking them now, and we're going to continue shrinking. We've been shrinking the long way, we're going to continue shrinking that way and the width, and we'll do that both in the rolling and on our wrist. Okay, so let's heat up our project. And we're going to continue rolling and continue hand massaging. Just when you roll, keep in mind to do an even count. We're doing rolls of 50, and just treat them equally from both sides, or at least from two edges at this point. You'll notice that we can roll a little more tightly now and a little more firmly, and we're also going to use more pressure in our rolling at this point. So before I was kind of resting my forearms down on the bundle, and now I'm going to use some more of my weight in the rolling. So I'm pressing now as I roll. So go ahead and allow your weight to rest on your forearms and push as you're rolling. Okay, so we can see that our wrist warmers are starting to shrink. They definitely are, and you notice that we keep turning them to avoid getting any kind of seam, and they've even shrunk in the width now as well. So we're going to continue working that, and just decide where you want your design now so that you begin shaping it to better accommodate that, including making the top of the hand smaller if you want. You can leave it big, but this is a little bulky, so we're going to focus on that. And however we roll the wool, it shrinks. So we're going to rub it and roll it where we want it to shrink now some more, and focus on some specific areas. So I'm getting it wet and hot. I'm just continually really heating it up. And we're going to focus on the top of the hands and shrinking those down more to shape. And I'm pressing and squeezing as I roll. The spa cover provides a nice work surface, and it is a bit of, it's a resistance, so it's got some pressure coming back. So you can just press right into it. It doesn't have too much give. So squeeze and press and roll, squeeze and press and roll. So you can see just that little bit of treatment by the one, and we've already have some shrinkage. You can see it's a little bit smaller. So let's continue that, get it a little bit smaller, and then we'll work on the other glove. Okay, so comparing the two, they look pretty good and they're starting to match. Okay, we're going to try our wrist warmers on here and see how we're doing. They're still pretty baggy and loose. We're going to take all that up in the felting process, but it's a good opportunity just to try them on and see how they feel and how they're fitting. We're coming along quite nicely. We still have plenty of felting left to do, and so we're going to heat up our project, and we're also going to turn them inside out so we can felt the inside as well. We've spent a lot of attention on the outside, but we want to take a minute and just gently turn those inside out. So take a second to heat up your fiber, just heat up the wool, and we're just going to rub and agitate them, making sure that the inside is really as well felted as the outside. So we're doing pretty good here. We're going to continue rolling, continue shrinking, and then we're going to try them on and see how they fit. So roll them up. We're using more pressure now. You can roll a little more tightly, meaning as you roll, and press down as you roll. Remember to keep count. Okay, so let's try them on now and see how they're fitting and just look at the sizing so we can decide how else we want to treat them as we're shrinking them or where we want to focus our attention. So putting my arm in, they're starting to shrink towards my arm. We still have some length to shrink and definitely some of the width. So that's what we're going to be focusing on, is any areas that we want to shrink now. We're really focusing now on shrinking them to fit our hand or our arm, and so wherever you want it to shrink is where we're going to rub. Note where you want your design to be so that you start shaping it to your wrist and your arm. And notice where the areas are kind of baggy, where you're going to want to focus your attention. So we're going to still be able to shrink them quite a bit. Just start to look at them, and now we're going to look at where our thumb hole is going to be. You know, you want this hole to come at the base of your thumb, not just at the top. So you're going to want to cut it basically in the middle where you're going to be inserting your thumb. So just keep that in mind as we're shaping. But for now, lots of pressure and lots of being a lot more aggressive now. The wool is not pilling under our hands. We're keeping our hands and the project wet and soapy, and we're even able to rub really hard on our surface. So we can be very aggressive here and focus where we need to on where we want them to shrink. Now we're going to do lots more rubbing and more rolling, more squeezing, being just increasingly aggressive now in this process as we're trying to get the wrist warmers to shrink to fit our particular shape. I'm really squeezing here. I'm squeezing and wadding and squeezing and wadding, just trying to get them to shrink down. And whatever direction we're going, that's the direction the fibers are going to shrink. So you can see I go in little short bursts, and I'm always checking the progress as I go. I don't go 100 counts before I see what's happening. I do 5s and 10s, pay attention. See how we're starting to reduce here at the wrist and really starting to reduce the girth and the length of this particular glove. Let's keep going. Okay, so we've done a lot here, and now we can compare the two and see just how much progress we've made with just a few moments of time. Really, we're really able to reduce the length and the width of the glove just by focusing some attention where we want the shrinkage to happen. So you can see what a difference that has made, and we want to spend some time and treat the other glove so that we shrink it evenly to match. Our gloves are shaping up quite nicely, and we're going to put them on. We have a pretty good fit going. You can see if we wanted to stop shrinking right now, we could, because they fit really nicely. We're going to continue a little bit, but notice we have a nice fabric. It's got a nice thickness, and while we could shrink them some more, we want to cut our thumb holes before we go any further. But they're feeling pretty good. Let's find the place where we're going to put our cuts. We want to make enough room for our thumb joint to move around. You want to have flexibility in the hand, and so notice where those are going to go. As we look at them, you just want to get that positioning really right, and you also want to make sure that you cut a right and a left hand. So find those spaces, and you also want to make sure that you have enough flexibility for your hands to move around depending on what you're going to be using them for, because you can get them pretty tight, but you want to have room to flex your hand. Now, we have a model here of one that we've already done. If you made yourself a fleece or some other model, then you can see where your thumb joint's going to go, but you want your thumb joint to be fully exposed. So find the spot, and then we're going to cut right in the middle of that. Just take a moment and find where your thumb joint is so that you get the hole in the right place. And then we'll just cut both gloves at the same time. So we're going to follow our model. We're going to make a small snip right here, right in the middle of that thumb joint hole, and we're going to do both gloves. Take your time. You don't want to cut too close to the end of the hand. You can always cut the hole bigger later. So start smaller and be conservative, because you can stretch it out while you felt. Small snip, and then we'll cut out a little half circle. Okay, we have our initial cuts made, so let's try them on and see how we're doing. And we can start to work those holes a little bit now and felt them a little bit. See how they feel. You can stretch them a little bit while you're felting, but you can also cut them a little bit bigger if they're not big enough. But right now, start felting the hole, and then you can also shrink down the rest of the glove and the hand area now that you have those in place. So we want to get a really good finish on those holes, just like we have with any other cuts. Spend time working on those, and also spend time fulling in other areas. Don't let your thumb be constricted though. If you need to cut that hole bigger, do. Just err towards the bottom of the hole probably, and don't let the distance at the top of the glove get too short. We are in the final phases now, fulling our gloves and shaping them to fit. Make sure you take time to work those thumb holes, make sure they're a good fit, and then really refine those cuts. And we're going to use our work surface or our spa cover as a washboard, further burnishing and fulling our gloves to fit. Spend time to get yours just right, and then we're going to do a hot and cold water rinse. You can also rinse in vinegar water. It's a solution with vinegar and water to fully break down any soap that's still in there, and then we're going to set them to dry overnight. So work yours, get them to fit just right, and we're going to finish ours up right now. We're all finished. Our mittens were allowed to dry overnight. They are a fabulous fit and oh so cozy. We're very happy with them, and they were really great fun to make. So we shrunk these down or folded them more than our original pair. The original pair was a little more loose, a little more gentle of a fit. So decide how you want yours to be. You'll know once you have the fabric based on the pinch test, but just fold them down until they're a texture you like. Keep in mind that they're going to feel a little more coarse when they're still wet, and they'll feel more soft once they're dry. So I just want to show you how much we actually shrunk our wrist warmers in the felting process. You might recall we cut off about 2 inches from one of the mittens, but all the rest you see here is shrinkage from the felting and fulling process. So keep that in mind. Never fear while you're felting. Just keep going and keep working it to shrink them down to fit your arm. Well, that's all for this tutorial today. We hope you've had fun watching along as we wet felt our wrist warmers. If you did, please leave us your feedback below and let us hear from you. If you decide to make your own pair, remember to send us a picture. Every picture posted on our Facebook page or sent to us at submissions@livingfelt.com is a chance to win great felting prizes and even gift certificates from our web store at feltingsupplies.livingfelt.com. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure to subscribe and catch all of our felting videos, and we'll see you next time. Until then, have a great day, and as always, happy felting.